Hello, and welcome to this video, which provides an introduction to the C# programming language. This video is aimed at people who are new to programming in C#, and the intention is to provide you with a quick introduction to some of the basics of the language. We're going to be using Microsoft Visual C# 2005 Express Edition. Although the intention is more to provide you with a view of the language itself rather than the development tools. So let's start by creating a new project, which is going to be a console application, which is basically an application that runs on the DOS prompt. And we're going to call it My First Application. So Visual Studio Express creates the skeleton of a program for you to fill in. Before we look at the detail of all this code, I'm just going to add something very simple so that you can see the program in operation before we delve into the details. Now you'll notice that below where I'm typing, the Visual Studio IntelliSense is displayed, which shows options of things that you might want to use. It prompts you basically for functions and methods that are available to you. I'll explain what that means later. So we're going to use console.writeLine, and I'm just going to say hello world. So let's look at this in operation. If I do start without debugging, and the program runs and displays the message hello, world on the screen. And then we press a key to continue. So now we've seen what the program does, let's just take a second to analyze the structure of the program and see how it all fits together. The program starts with several using statements. Now these basically just tell the program that you'll be using some of the .NET framework tools. There's a toolkit that comes with the .NET framework, and these statements here refer to the tools that are available inside that toolkit. Then after that we have a line which declares a namespace. Now a namespace is really just a way of grouping your code together and putting a name around that bit of code. After that you get a little open curly brace, and you can see there, I hope, that Visual Studio highlights the matching close brace at the bottom of the program. So everything between those two braces, it belongs to the My First Application namespace. So inside the My First Application namespace we've got a statement which reads class program. Now this declares a class called program. Now you'll find out more about classes in due course, but basically a class is the fundamental unit of programming in C#. And again we've got some curly braces which define a code block, and everything inside that code block belongs to class program. So the only thing inside class program at the moment is a method called main. Now methods are basically in C# what do most of the work inside of a class, and again we've got a code block, and everything inside that code block belongs to the method called main. The main method is a special case inside of a C# program because that's where the program starts running. I'm going to ignore this section here for the second, and we'll come on to that later. But basically inside of the main method we have one line of code which just says console.writeLine hello world, as we've seen that in operation. So basically you know that writes to the screen. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you how to create another method, and the way that C# works is basically that one method calls another method which calls another method, etc., and it's by running methods that your program will actually work. So we're going to create another method. Its name is say hello world, and basically it's going to do the same as the main method currently does. So I'm going to move that code into the say hello world method, and then inside of main I'm going to call say hello world. Just as an aside at this point, you may notice some of these little semicolons that I put at the end of a line. Basically, in C#, a line doesn't end when you put a new line, a line ends when you put a semicolon. So that, for example, in here, this has exactly the same effect as if that line break wasn't there, because it's the semicolon at the end that tells C# that that's the end of that line of code. So, let's watch this running, and I'm going to use Control F5 this time to start running the program without debugging. And it does exactly the same as it does before. But this time, it's done things slightly differently. And what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to use the debugger to step through the program and show you how it's working. So to step into code inside the debugger, I use the F11 key. I press F11, and you can see there's a yellow arrow here which says the next statement that's about to be executed, and then the line that's about to be executed is highlighted in yellow. So again, the next line I'm going to do is the say hello world, and when I press F11 I step into the say hello world method, which does console.writeLine. So let's watch this in operation. If I look at the output console window at the moment, there's nothing in there. But once I've stepped over the console.writeLine statement, I've got my hello world printed on the screen. Then the program meets the curly brace at the end of the say hello world method, which means that's the end of the method. So when I press F11, I go back to where I called the say hello world method from. I go back to the main method, and then I meet the end of that method, and of course the end of the main method is the end of the program. So at its simplest, a method is just a way of grouping some code together. But what's also great about methods is that you can pass what's called a parameter into a method. A parameter is a bit of information that the method can use while it's doing its processing. So let's create a method that uses a parameter. So in this instance, I'm going to create a new method called sayHello2, and it's going to take a parameter called toWhom. And I've declared this parameter. It's called toWhom, and it's of type string. Now basically, when you declare a parameter, you give it a type, and that tells C# what type of information it will be storing inside that parameter. In this instance, we're using the string data type, which basically says that there will be text of some kind inside the parameter. So to recap, we've declared another method called sayHello2. It takes a string parameter, and inside of the method we're going to refer to that parameter with the name toWhom. And you can declare other things than parameters. I'm going to declare another string called message, and I'm going to set a value to that, which is hello, and then I'm going to join to that toWhom. And then if I do console.writeLine message, that will write the contents of the message variable onto the console. So now we've created our method, we need to actually call it, and from main I'm going to say hello to Eric, and also Sandra. So without further ado, let's run that. And you can see that the program has displayed hello world as before, and it's also printed up hello Eric and hello Sandra. So as you can see in main, this is how it's happened. Let's just step through with the debugger so you can see what's going on here. The program executes say hello world, which writes hello world onto the console. Then it goes to say hello to with the parameter Eric. So let's step into that, and down here we can see the value of the variables in this method, and we can see that to whom has the value Eric, and at the moment message has a null value, which means there's nothing in there. I step over that line, and suddenly a message now has the value hello Eric, and then we write that value to the console, and that's the end of that method. Then we process the same method using Sandra as a parameter, and again we generate the message, write it to the console, and that's the program finished. Now you may be wondering why I haven't put quotes around message in this statement inside the say hello to method, and the reason is that when I put quotes around some text, I'm telling CSharp that that is the exact text I want to put on the screen, whereas when I don't put quotes, it uses the contents of the variable called message. So let's just show you what happens if I did put quotes around that text. And you can see that it's printed hello world as before, but then it's printed message twice, just the text message, and that corresponds once to each call to the say hello to method, because each time it's been called it's just printed the word message on the screen rather than the contents of the variable message. So I'll put that back to how it was and just check that it works, which it does. Now another really good thing about methods is that they can produce a result, an output value. So this time I'm going to create another method, and this time instead of void, which means that there is no output, I'm going to output a string, and the method's going to be called calculate greeting. As before, we take a string parameter which we're also going to call to whom. So basically I'm going to calculate it as before by joining hello to the contents of the parameter, but this time instead of writing it to the console, I'm just going to use the return keyword. Return message. So what happens here is that the calculate greeting method is going to return a value, and the value it will return is the contents of the variable message. And in say hello to, I'm going to replace this with a call to calculate greeting using to whom as the parameter to pass into calculate greeting. So this will behave exactly as before, and I'm going to press Ctrl F5 just to show you that. And now again let's step through and see how it works. I'm actually going to step over say hello world because we've seen that before. I use the F10 key to step over a method, and then I'm going to step into say hello to, and again the message is null, but I'm going to step into calculate greeting, and calculate greeting calculates the message as before and then returns that value. So at this point we've returned from calculate greeting, but we haven't processed the assignment here, so message is still null. But once I step over, you can see that message now contains the return value hello Eric that was calculated by calculate greeting, and then as before we write those values to the console, and I'm going to step over the second call to say hello to, and that's the end of the program again. So let's say we wanted to provide a different greeting depending on whom we're greeting. So if we go to the calculate greeting method, what we want to do is we want to provide a different greeting depending on the contents of the variable to whom. So if to whom equals Eric, then we add a little code block, and we're going to say hi, and else we're going to say what we originally said. So I can do away with this line in the code here. So what will happen here is that during the calculate greeting method, we're going to test to see if to whom equals Eric, and then if it does, then we're going to set a message hi plus to whom. If to whom is not Eric, then CSharp processes the else statement, and there's a code block here which sets message to hello as before. So let's watch that in operation, and you can see that it says hi Eric but hello Sandra. So let's run the program again in the debugger to see how this works. I'll step over say hello world, and into say hello to, which goes to calculate greeting, and you can see that to whom does equal Eric. So in this if statement, we go into the first part of the if statement where we set the message hi Eric, and we skip over the else because we've done the first part, and we return the value hi Eric, and then that gets written to the console. Then go back to main. This time we're passing in the Sandra as the parameter value, so we step into calculate greeting, and this time to whom equals Sandra, therefore this test to whom equals Eric will fail. It will not be true, and in that instance CSharp processes the else part of the statement. So in that case we assign hello plus Sandra, so we get the message hello Sandra, and then we work our way back through the program. So that shows how we can use some factors inside the program to control how the program flows by using the if statement. Now what I want to do is I want to show you how you can make the program do things repeatedly. So in C# that's called looping, because the program loops around doing the same code and until something happens to make it stop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the current contents of the main method, and we're going to prompt on the console for someone to type in a name, and then we're going to say hello to the name that's been typed in, and then when someone just hits enter without typing a name in, that will end the program. So how we're going to do that is, first of all, we'll write something to the console. We're going to use write rather than write line this time, so that we don't put a line break. And it's going to say, please enter your name, and then declare a variable called name of type string, and the value we're going to assign to that is another method we haven't called before, called console.readLine. Now that will read a name, read a line from the console and assign the value that's read in to the variable called name. So while name does not equal, and then those two double quotes together with nothing in between denote an empty string, i.e. a string with nothing inside it. So while name is not empty string, we'll process the code block, and inside that we will say hello to name, and then we're going to put up the prompt again and read another line in. So let's watch this in operation. I type in Eric, and the program says, "Hi, Eric." Type in Sandra, and the program says, "Hello, Sandra." And if I hit the Enter key on its own, then the program ends. So again, let's use the debugger to step through and see how this is working. First of all, we write in the console, "Please enter your name." I'm going to just hop over here, and you can see that we've printed "Please enter your name." And then when I execute the read line method, I get chucked to the console. So I type in Eric, and then again we've got to test, a bit like the if statement. It's going to test whether name equals Eric, whether name is not the empty string, which of course Eric is not empty, it's Eric. So we process what's inside the loop, which does say hello to. I'm going to step over that because you've seen that working already. And then again we write up a message on the console, "Please enter your name." Let's just see that in operation. So we've got the "Hi Eric" and then "Please enter your name" again. And then we read a line from the console. This time I'm just going to hit enter. And what happens at the end of this block of code, at the curly brace here, is that we loop back up to the while statement. And this time name is in fact the empty string. So the test fails, and we step over the code block and then out of the program because there's no more code to execute. So that's just a quick introduction to some of the tricks you can do using C#. You can learn some more tricks in a bit more detail, and you can find out some more about how classes work in the article that accompanies this video. So I hope you'll take the time to look at that article and try out some of these things for yourself.